Now call this meeting to order. I trust that your cell phones are on silent. At this time, we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. It's supposed to be by Councilwoman Coonrod, but she does not look like she's present yet. So if you'll please stand, we will pledge the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so moved. We have no special presentations this afternoon. Could I get a motion on the minutes? I have a motion with a proper second with no objections. The minutes will stand as recorded. Council, moving down into our discussion of agenda. If you'll take a look at this evening's agenda, we do have ordinances under first reading planning items that will be discussed during our planning and zoning meeting by Chairman Ledford. So if you would hold those questions until our committee meeting. Moving down into resolutions. Any questions or comments under board appointments, under council office? Seeing no questions or comments, moving to economic development and human resources. All right. We have one item under IT. Any questions or comments there? And moving down into mayor's office, any questions on any of the appointments there? All right. That takes us towards the end of our agenda this evening for planning and public works. Any questions or comments on these items? Council, if you would now take a look at next week's proposed agenda for June the 11th. Again, under planning items, we'll be discussing those during our planning and zoning. You have a couple of items under first read, finance, and planning, which, council, we do have this afternoon, and we will adjourn till 6, or recess until 6, I'm sorry, because we do have our public hearing on the 24-25 budget this afternoon. All right, moving to resolutions on next week's agenda. Any items there for discussion or comment? We do have this afternoon the administration under 9A approving the amendment for the economic impact plan. We will have a couple of slides, Chief, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That we will plan to insert in between our CBID presentation this afternoon and planning and zoning. You good with that, Councilman?
Yes, sir.
Having that before planning and zoning. I think you're going to have a couple of slides on the amendment to the economic impact plan as well as the development agreement.
That's correct.
Well, correct? All right. Any other questions or comments under resolutions for next week's agenda? All right, council, if you would take a look at your purchase items this afternoon. We do have 5 purchase items for your consideration. Any questions or comments concerning any of these 5 purchase items? Moving on then to future considerations. If you will take a look at your future considerations. Let me know if you have any questions or comments concerning any item there. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for Chief of Staff. Are we good on item G for next week? Did you get what you needed, Jermaine?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the phone call. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, good. All right, anything else? Anything else that needs to come before the council before we go into our committee and department reports? All right, if not, Mr. Brooks, if you want to come and give us a budget presentation this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Chairman Henderson and City Council, for giving me the time to be here today. In your council package, you should have the DCA budget cover page, 2024 budget forecast, as well as our budget for 2025 and the DCA formal evaluation letter. We're forecasting to end the 2024 fiscal year with a deficit of $124,000 versus our original budgeted deficit of $133,000. Again, we can fund this deficit because of the excess cash brought forward from previous years. The 2025 budget includes the following: total assessments that will be billed minus allowance of $25,000 for bad debt and assessment waivers. $705,000 be paid for block by block for its maintenance, safety, and hospitality services. $50,000 for beautification projects, $27,000 for public relations, marketing, and communication services, 2% assessment collection fee to be paid to the city of Chattanooga, approximately $21,500 for continued rent of DCA office space, and a deficit of $90,000, which will be funded by excess cash brought forward from prior years. So with that, I'll ask if there's any questions from the council.
All right, council, you have any questions for Mr. Brooks this time? Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Steve. Thanks for being here. Will you tell us a little bit about where the next step, we have a letter in our packet that explains where the board has taken the decision per the ordinance to move ahead and the evaluation of the services that the CBID is offering, the DCA.
Sure. In the city ordinance section 11534, resolution number 29962, and at the end of the 5-year anniversary of the bid, there needs to be a formal evaluation completed. The board of directors decided to contract out Jim Kennedy to to conduct that evaluation. It came back very positive for the Business Improvement District, or the DCA. With his recommendation and his evaluation and interviews and surveys that he did with the downtown stakeholders, he recommended to the board that we continue for another 5 years, and so the board decided to vote upon that recommendation and continue the bid till 2029, where we have another evaluation term that comes in front of us based on state law in the city ordinance of Chattanooga.
Thank you, Steve. And there are, since the creation of the CBID or DCA, however we want to refer to it, we've branched out. I say we, because in full disclosure, I do sit on this board. We've just added on to the services in light of surveys and collaboration and communication with members of the CBID that have, and I've been privy to see some of those reports that are very positive of what we're doing. But there's also a couple of new things that we're branching out to, I believe under your leadership.
I mean, we're always working to improve downtown and work with our partners. A lot of them are to my left and behind me and to my right. The biggest thing that people comment on is our beautification program that we've done. So a lot of the flower pots are on Broad Street, coming off Highway 27 on 4th Street, and then we did a demo block on Broad Street between 4th and 5th. We work very closely with our social service partners, engaging the folks who are experiencing homelessness on the streets and directing them into services. So Casey and his team are vital to that, as well as many other people throughout the city and county. We work very closely, obviously, with CPD. Chief Chambers behind me and his team have been great in adding additional patrols downtown and meeting with us on a regular basis to listen to our concerns and work together to address them. So there's a lot of different things we're working on and trying to improve, but the city's been a great partner. You all have been a great partner, and the county as well.
Very good. Chairman, one more comment. In those reports that I was able to review, Steve, there's also a lot of good things said about you. A lot of good things. Your leadership, your commitment. I know I personally have seen you down there at midnight on a Saturday at an event, and you're doing things that I really didn't think you would be doing, or anybody for that matter, because of the commitment of the DCA working with its members and the downtown community. So I wanted to say I noted that, and I thank you for it. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I know a lot of people have seen it as well. So I appreciate you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have right now.
Thank you, sir. All right, any other questions at this time? Steve, thanks so much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you very
Presenting
much.
the report. Thank you. All right, Chief, if you would,
Yes, sir.
let's talk about some amendments and development agreements.
Yes, let's get into it. Let's see here. All right, good deal. So just as a reminder, when we were last here in February, the city and county had worked to come together on an MOU that would sort of enshrine a new financing structure for the cost of the stadium. And so just as a reminder to kind of take you through where we've already been, what the city and county agreed to, and I'm fortunate that we have Hamilton County Deputy Mayor Corey Guerin is here as well. What the city and county agreed to in principle was that there would be $80 million of proceeds from the bonds that would be used for the stadium, which the city and county would be responsible for. There would be a subordinate TIF of up to $26 million, which includes $10 million for perimeter properties and $16 million for the lookouts. That would be payable from tax increment revenues from the city only. There would be $1 million of interest earnings on the bond proceeds that would be dispersed. There would be a $3 million capital contribution from the team, and then there would be the $5 million of additional debt that would be incurred by the Sports Authority that would be supported also by the city's incremental property tax revenues, and then debt service by hotel motel taxes and local option sales taxes. In addition to that, we have the special sales tax allocation that was created by the state delegation, which we appreciate.
Chief, I just fixed to say, Chief, is that on the slide up there? Because
Yes.
we don't have it on, we don't have the slide on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think Anthony's gonna try to help us out. Sorry about that.
I thought maybe you were just catching us up and you kept looking up.
My memory would be fantastic.
Here we go.
Yeah. So, okay.
That was a lot to take in without.
Extra man I'm following.
I love you guys too. Okay, so, all right, so as I was saying, just to sort of revisit where we were back in February, so we've got the $80 million in proceeds for the bonds for the stadium, which the city and county had initially agreed to, and which we are continuing to partner with through the MOU that was voted on by the city council and the county commission in February. In addition to that, you've got the $26 million in the form of a subordinate TIF, which is also captured in the MOU, which includes the $16 million subordinate TIF by the lookouts and the $10 million subordinate TIF by perimeter properties. You have the $1 million of interest earnings on the proceeds of the bonds, the $3 million capital contribution from the lookouts, and then the $5 million of additional debt from incremental property taxes by the Sports Authority. In addition to that, we have the lease payments of $1 million per year with the escalator from the lookouts. And then we have the sales tax capture, which was granted to us by the Tennessee State Legislature to also provide some debt service capability. And then as a reminder, none of the county's portion of the tax increment could be used that would normally be used for schools. That is still protected. And then any shortfall to be paid by the city and county from non-property tax revenues. So this is just a reminder of the MOU that both the city and the county voted on back in late February. And so just as a reminder, the city council voted on this MOU on February 27th. The commission took a similar action the next day on February 28th. And then the City County Sports Authority voted on the MOU on March the 14th. On March the 25th, the cities and counties' respective industrial development boards held a rare combined meeting to review an amendment to their respective economic impact plans. Now, why was this necessary? The reason that it's necessary is because when we initially passed this economic impact plan back in 2022, that original economic impact plan did not capture this new financing structure that was reflected in the MOUs. So we had to go back to the IDBs to have the economic impact plans amended so that the amendments would capture this new financing structure that has now, that both the city council and county commission agreed to by MOU. So once the IDBs recommended the amendments, now the amendments have to come back to you all as well as the county commission for final approval. And so both industrial development boards voted to advance the amendment to the city council and county commission for final consideration during their joint meeting on March the 25th. The amendment to the city's economic impact plan, as I mentioned, it basically permits the issuance of the additional $5 million of debt that was described in the MOU for the Sports Authority. And the amendment would permit the excess tax increment revenues to be used to pay the additional subordinate TIF of $26 million. And then the amendment will also make sure to provide the clarification on the percentage withheld by the city. And so that is a summary of the amendment. The amendment is a relatively short document. It is just less than a page long. And so the amendment basically substitutes what was encaptured in the MOUs that were approved in late February and replaces that language in the economic impact plan. Now, at this time, I want to ask Mark Mametov to come up to go over a couple of highlights of the development agreement. One thing that I will note about the development agreement is that the development agreement is not a document that the city council or county commission is party to. It is a document that is between the property owners and the Sports Authority. However, because there has been such an interest in the development agreement, we wanted to share that with you so that you would have it. We also shared with you a summary as well as an analysis provided by Mark Mametov. Mark.
Thank you. As always, it's good to see you. I'm Mark Mametov. The development agreement, I'm sorry that it took so long to finish. It was a much more difficult agreement than I think any of us expected when we dove into it. But both sides worked very hard to get it done as quickly as we could. There's the number of key points in this development agreement. They're essentially listed above. The first one is, one thing that we were really concerned about was breaking ground on the stadium and not having the property adjacent to the stadium developed. New city properties, and you know them as Jim Irwin, we often talk about Jim, agreed to go ahead and close on the essentially L-shaped lot that surrounds the stadium. That's a very substantial financial commitment of over $5 million that they're prepared to do, that we would not close the bond issue unless that happens at the same time. It shows a significant financial commitment on their part. I know that all of us in the, that have been working on this, and I think the community is very excited to have a very high quality developer who's very experienced with blending historic renovation into new development, and to have them commit to come in and do this, I think was a major step. Obviously, we'd love for them to break ground as soon as possible, and they've agreed to some timelines that to finish what is known as schematic drawings, design drawings, construction drawings, and eventually permit within the next year after the stadium financing is closed. And so so we'll have those timelines on top of the closing. But the closing itself, to me, is one of probably the two most critical parts of this agreement, that is to show a very significant commitment on the part of a very good master developer. Overall, there's a general commitment to use commercially reasonable efforts to develop the whole site on the part of the current site owner. When you see the agreement, it's with a new entity, but that new entity is essentially perimeter and pipe. It was just simply some governance issues. It was better to do it in a corporation than in LLCs, and so, but it's essentially the same thing. And they will be agreeing to move forward and with all commercially reasonable efforts to develop the entire Wheeland Foundry U.S. pipe site. Now, that's a very general covenant. It's not something that it does not have specific milestones, but it is more of a constant reporting, asking how that will happen. And so we will certainly stay on top of that after hopefully this financing closes. There is a very clear commitment on the site owner's part, that the only public infrastructure that will be public responsibility is essentially some leading directly into the stadium. Anything else on the Wheel and Foundry side is not something that they're going to come back and ask for a TIF or thing. They themselves actually don't benefit from any of the tax increment financing. All tax increment is going into the stadium itself, which will be publicly owned. There are very specific targets at 5 years after the stadium and 8 years after the stadium opens. And that can either be based on square footage of buildings built or acreage of how much has been developed. And so these targets are very concrete, and it will be on the developers, it'll be on the site owner's role to get these done, and I'm sure they'll be working with New City Properties to shoot for these targets. They are generally in line with the Younger report in the sort of worst-case scenario that was shown to you a number of months ago. The calendar has changed a little bit somewhat, but the goal was to try to, that's where the 5 and the 8 came from, is that we hope that this will be a self-sufficient and the bonds will be payable fully from tax increment revenues by the end of that 8-year period. If not sooner, we'd obviously like it to happen sooner. One part of that too is that not more than a certain percentage can be single-family residential. I don't want you all to think we don't like single-family residential, but number one, it's assessed at a 25% rate, then a 40% rate, so it results in less tax increment revenues. But secondly, the density that we're looking for around this development, it doesn't make, this is not a single, it's not, just a typical single-family dwelling sort of thing. There certainly will be some townhomes and things like that, but we essentially, the numbers limit the single-family percentages to 30% roughly. And that was based, tied to sort of their early projections that were used for the Younger report. Probably the biggest thing, and I know this is we've had a lot of questions about clawbacks and things like that. And so what happens if these things are not, this is the most concrete thing that will happen if they don't meet these goals, is basically what I've been concerned about for a long time, and I know is that this is a big TIF area, and I know you all know that. It's much bigger than this development. And it would be very unreasonable for them, and I'm not saying they will do this because they wouldn't, they have every incentive to develop the property, but if they for some reason chose not to develop the property at all, but the South Broad area took off like wildfire and it was paying the entire TIF, it would be really unfortunate for them to be being paid from when they didn't create the revenues. And so that's really what took us so long to negotiate, is try to figure out a way that was a win-win for both sides. And so we have a fairly complicated formula, and I got to try to but basically they have those 5 and 8 year goals. To the extent they miss those goals, the increment that is not from their side, from the U.S. Pipe, Wheel and Foundry side, will be put in escrow, and they will lose a percentage of that for each year that they don't hit those targets. That is essentially the financial penalty to them for not doing this. Their TIF of the site owner's part is $10 million. There's no way they're going to lose their whole $10 million in the real world, but it could be in the millions of dollars if they don't develop the site consistent with these targets that we've talked about. Theoretically, if they did nothing on the site for 30 years, they would lose their entire $10 million TIF. But that's obviously not going to happen. Jim's going to have the first part built, hopefully here within a year. But we felt like this was a reasonable compromise after extensive negotiations. And that is probably, along with the purchase of the property, the two things that have the most teeth to them. We also negotiated that the top part where the stadium is sort of looks like a tomahawk to me, or an arrow. And so that upper portion, we negotiated that if they default under this agreement, that the IDB, and the reason it's the IDB is that they have the legal authority to do this, would have a purchase option to purchase at a fairly significant discount the undeveloped property that they have not developed. Therefore, we could get it in another developer's hands and try to create the sort of synergy that should be going on around the stadium. And then there's also the general right in the agreement that the Sports Authority would have what we call, lawyers love to call, specific performance. In other words, they could sue them to force them to comply with the agreement. So that is it. And
Thank you, Mark.
Yes.
So with our upcoming actions, obviously we have next week's votes by the City Council and the County Commission related to the vote on the amendments. If the economic impact plan amendments are approved, the City County Sports Authority would review and consider some additional agreements, including the lease for the lookouts, the site donation agreement, and the indenture for the bond issuance. These are all documents that go before the Sports Authority. Perimeter properties and the lookouts, my understanding is that they are working hard on a community benefits agreement with the Bethlehem Center, which will represent the interest of the South Chattanooga Community Association. It is also important to note that this development agreement will look different from, say, the development agreement for other projects like the Bend, because some of the community benefit stuff that was in the Bend development agreement would be captured in this community benefits agreement. And so that's an important distinction to understand, just in terms of how these two deals are structured. The city's IDB will review and consider the subordinate TIF loan agreements for the lookouts and perimeter properties. And if we can continue to push the boulder, we are looking at a groundbreaking ceremony in late June or early July. Questions?
Council, any questions for Chief? Councilwoman Dolly.
Yeah, so I have, and I'm sure you know what I'm gonna ask about, Jermaine.
Sure.
But of course, I'm always concerned about the community benefits agreement because
Yes,
it
ma'am.
is specifically attached to South Chattanooga Community Association. So can I get an update on what's going on with that and, any
Sure.
proposed information that we can
Sure.
share?
Why don't I invite one of the parties who will be party to the community benefits agreement to come up? Mr. Stone?
Thank you, Jermaine. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see everyone. So thank you for having me up here. We've had a great call about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago on the CBA. Now that it's switched from Caleb to the Bethlehem Center, they are in the process of getting some legal representation. We took the feedback from the call that we had and sent a red line over. So red line is back in y'all's hands as of this afternoon. Not a lot of changes to it, which is good. So we're very positive on it, and we think it'll be completed here in the next week, hopefully this week, if not next week.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that, Andy. Yes. And Jermaine, I appreciate that as well because we would hate to not break ground as soon as possible because that's not done.
The community benefits are important.
That's right.
Amen.
Thank you, Jermaine.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good.
Mr.
Councilman
Chair.
Ledford?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, in reading your memo, I want to appreciate the detail and note that I was reading. So I have a two question for you and Jermaine too. Number one, can you talk a little bit more about this 5 and 8 year benchmark? This is something that really piqued my attention as it really assigned accountability and incentive and a will to get this property developed. And the follow-up question for you, Jermaine, would be, have we done that before in any TIF? I think this is a kind of new territory that protects the city and its taxpayers in
Yes.
this relationship, does it not?
So this is new territory.
Okay.
This project is pushing us to be as innovative as we can possibly be. And so we thought that this would be necessary to provide the additional oversight that would be important because this is a generational project and it requires a new novel approach. And so we felt like this would be the level of oversight that would be appropriate for the time. Mark, you want to add anything?
No, I'm sorry, by the way, I know I tend to get in the weeds, and I apologize for that, but no, I think that Jermaine said it well, and I felt that this was the best compromise that we could reach to adequately protect the community and provide a meaningful financial incentive to them to get it done. And so it is unique. Never done anything like this in many other TIFs that I've worked on, but this is a unique deal because the TIF is being used to support a public asset, being the stadium. I think often people conflate the team with the site owner, and they're very separate. There's no legal relationship between the two, and what the site owner is being asked to do is support the stadium, which is very different. Again, the lease issues that we'll deal with the team are separate.
Okay. Well, I thought that was important to note because, TIFs and pilots have been something I've been interested for years and reading through them, yes, I have read many of them. I've never seen that sort of, I'm not going to call it clawback language. I'm going to talk, these are severe penalties if these benchmarks aren't met, which is actually an added layer of protection. And I thought that was worth noting.
They are, and again, to Mark's point, this is, we had this last conversation at the end of February, and so it's taken us a little while to get here, because these are not easy things to negotiate. But we appreciate the willingness of Perimeter Properties and the Lookouts and New City for being good partners throughout this process.
Very good. I have some other notes, but Chairman, I'm going to yield, see if anyone else has any questions. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
I don't have anybody, I've got a couple of questions, but I can come back to you. Refresh my memory. What's the amount of development that it was going to take to pay for the $80 million?
It was roughly $500 to $550 million.
Okay. And for right now, we're only committing to 100 million. Well, I wouldn't even say we're committing to it. It's in the agreement, it looked like they were expected, but there's really, is that a guaranteed number? The 100 million, they're bringing 100 million. Is that a guaranteed number? Is that the number that the clawbacks are based on?
Yes, but then there is the additional language which shows that as they move through phase one and they create the additional there is the responsibility to create the additional square footage and to go from 600,000 square feet to 1.3 million square feet, which would then bring on additional investment. Mark, let me know if I said anything wrong there.
No, I mean, the 100 million is a commitment as to the first, I mean, again, a little bit in the weeds is that if Jim decides and his team feel like, oh my gosh, I had this great opportunity to bring in a corporate headquarters and that's going to take my focus for a couple of years, they have the ability to move, develop another side and have a little bit of delay on that one. But the 100 million is a commitment.
Is a commitment,
Yes.
not expected as the slide shows.
Right.
Okay. Chief,
Yes.
one thing that concerns me a little bit about this and I don't understand the difference between the 5 year and 8 years. I know it's within 8 years of the stadium being completed that we're going to bring on this 100 million online. Because here's my question. There was a certain amount, and I'm trying to go back a couple of months and remember exactly, we had a portion that we were pulling out of our revenues to fund the debt obligation.
Correct.
And I think that was for a period of about 3 years that we were going to do that. Was it 3 or 5?
It was about 3 years.
That's what I thought, 3 years.
Yeah.
If this doesn't come online till 5 years, are we now pushing what we're going to be obligated for debt obligation 3 to 5 years, from 3 to 5 years? Are we now going to be obligated for more years of debt obligation if this is not coming online until 5 years?
You want me to take that?
Yeah.
I mean, the honest answer is you're obligated theoretically for 30 years for this to, the bonds are going to be out there, but the projections.
I'm going by the projections that
Yes,
we were presented. We were told that we would expect 3 years of it coming out of our budget, and then after 3 years, there would be enough coming online to start paying that debt obligation.
So when JP Morgan and we had the meeting at the chamber and they presented sort of like, okay, this rosy 3-year scenario, and then they said, here's a 50% scenario. That roughly was a 7-year, 2031, when it started breaking even and there was no money being advanced by the city and the county at that point. These numbers are more consistent with that scenario than the 3-year, which was candidly a more rosy scenario. And this scenario is and I'm glad.
So you're telling me now the 3 years was a rosy scenario?
Well, that's probably an unfair word, rosy, because, and the reason I should say,
You need to choose
rosy-
your words
Yes,
wisely up here.
Yes. So how about chartreuse or thing? But no, it is the reason I'm now sort of eating those words is because there's already quite a bit of off-site development, as we went over before, that makes it much more likely that but it is somewhere in that 3 to 7 year margin that I believe that is.
So Chief, are we
Yes.
saying now we could expect to service that debt obligation up to 7 years now?
No, I think what Mark is trying to say is we are still pushing forward for the 3-year mark, but we understood that we would need to negotiate an agreement that would also, capture some of the market realities of interest rates being where they were, and also be reflective of what JP Morgan put in the slides in terms of, well, what happens if there was a 50% reduction in investment? And so what we did was we negotiated a development agreement that could help us to meet in the middle. These guys are still planning to come out guns blazing, which Jim could speak to. But the development agreement, we had to structure in a way to make sure that we were speaking to, like, here's where we're hoping for, but this is what we think but we also realize that, like, look, there are market conditions that are outside of all of our control that we do need to be mindful of, and that we do have to consider as we go through this process. But these guys are still planning to come out of the gate guns blazing, and I think we're really excited. Jim, you want to add anything?
Well, I think I would like to hear from Jim
Sure.
to see what his take on, like, when he thinks he's going to get started, and, there's quite a bit of difference between coming online in 5 years and in 8 years.
Of course, and thank you for having me. I'm always honored to come speak to you. I think the important things that I would focus on, that your team negotiated as hard, if not harder, than any municipality that I've ever worked with over the years.
Well, I've told Jermaine to play hardball,
He did, and he is.
pun intended.
Yeah, and pun received, sir. I'm trying to take your question seriously. We find ourselves in an unprecedented time in the market where financing projects is very, very difficult, as we have all talked about. And so a lot of the discussion that happened as we were negotiating the development agreement was trying to find that middle ground between purely optimistic and purely pessimistic. And I think what Mark was sharing with you is that JP Morgan is doing their job in sort of presenting you the best and worst case scenarios. And so what Jermaine and Mark, the city, county, and the Sports Authority all felt was an appropriate indication of the seriousness in which we are taking this is to require us to actually close on the land prior to the bonds being used for the stadium. And so I think that's the thing that is really the headline of this agreement, is that our investors have agreed to purchase the land, which will be more than a $5 million investment right up front. And I think when you hear that, what you should say is, that's a lot of money. They must be very serious. And so that's really, I think, the best way that we could indicate the seriousness of our conviction about this project.
Well, I guess where I'm going with that here again is what I want to do is get a realistic view of how long we can expect to service this debt obligation coming out of our revenues, our general fund. But what I hear you say, I get that you're going to close on the land. When do you anticipate buildings going up?
So the other thing that the development agreement requires is that we immediately begin work on the design, which I will say we already have. So we've already begun work on, the design phase of, and as Mark mentioned, you sort of divide it into schematics, DDs, and construction drawings. That process can take about, 10 to 12 months, which is outlined in the agreement. And then our intent is to immediately move forward with permitting and construction.
And then I would also just add as a reminder that this development agreement is very specific to the 88 acres that Perimeter Properties controls. It does not count the rest of the TIF district where development is already happening and where increment is already being generated. And so this is very specific to perimeter Pipe Properties property, because we wanted to make sure that as the stadium got built or shortly thereafter, there was development happening that was directly adjacent to the stadium, so that as you're entering the western gateway of our city, you not only see the stadium, but you see all of the lovely development around it. But there is already increment being generated from the larger TIF district.
So from a timeline, and I think I heard it, there was a timeline somewhere I haven't seen, but do you anticipate starting buildings coming up out of the ground in conjunction with the stadium being built?
That is our goal, yes, absolutely. So based on just the time it takes to actually draw, complete the architecture process, what I would expect to see are buildings, by the first pitch, buildings will be out of the ground.
Coming out of the ground.
That's right. That's our goal. And just to add something to what Jermaine mentioned a moment ago, I think the thing that your team has fought hard for is sort of a multi-phase approach to ensuring the repayment of the bond. So the reason that they have focused so much on this first phase, on really committing us to the process that we have already started, is because actually seeing dynamic, stunning architecture in the outfield itself will be a catalyst for more development. Because really what you're asking is, how do we get this thing built out as quickly as possible? And the first thing is showing real signs of investment with beautiful architecture, placemaking, building a great place for people to come and hang out, and making it a desirable neighborhood for the community, for South Broad and all of Chattanooga. That really fulfills sort of the visual and the aesthetic goals, if you will. But then the other part of the DMA also requires that the property owners, in parallel, make a significant effort to start selling land around the stadium, the rest of the 8 acres. And that's really where the 5 and 8 year goals come in, is it's not just going to be one great project. It needs to be an entire district. And so that really is kind of where both of these sort of two-phased approaches are coming from.
Okay. Let me get Councilman Ledford on here now.
Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak again. When we first did the vote on the agreement to move this ahead, under your guidance, we put in an MOU with Core Development, which I believe at that time was a $170 million investment, if I'm hitting on the numbers correctly, Jermaine.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understood at our chamber meeting, they were ready to start breaking ground as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still online?
Yes, so they just completed the permitting process.
Okay.
And so we anticipate that they will be starting within the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that was important to note, because that was a huge, and I believe it was your motion to add that in as an MOU, which I'm grateful for. That was a good move, sir.
Thank you.
But I wanted to remind that we had at least 170 million in that bucket.
Correct.
Ready to go, and I think is in the pipeline.
And and so they went through our permitting process, and I won't get into the details, but they had some questions about extra stories on top of their buildings, and whether or not you could do rooftop patios and stuff like that, so.
Huh.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All right. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you. Chairman Henderson, I really appreciate your line of questioning and getting that clarity and reminding us all of what we have been anticipating as we've been studying this. Something that I would like to elevate for council and for the folks that are here, we've started to see with the One West Side project, some really interesting projects start showing up at Planning Commission, being announced, things that I for one, was not aware were in the pipeline. And so I'm hopeful that to Jim's point about a high level of architecture and quality, that we will see like follow like in that way. And I appreciate that within the development commitments that there will be a standard set by New City for how the quality of the development within this whole region. So it's easy for me to start really getting in the weeds and say, do I like the way this particular element lands in this development, but in this development agreement, but recognizing that council is not here to litigate this agreement, that you all have already done quite a bit of negotiation. I appreciate the work that went into it. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Chief, I've got a follow-up.
Sure.
Drifting into the clawbacks, I guess you might
Yes.
say. It said that we could buy back a portion of this land at a discounted price. Who determines what sorry?
I'm sorry, not to cut you off. Not the city, but the city's IDB could.
Well,
Yes.
same thing.
It's legally separate, but okay.
Who determines what that discounted price is? And
So what is in the agreement is that the discounted price would be 83% of the value. And so we understood that as development happens, again, there's going to be development that happens in the South Broad area that has nothing to do with these guys, but that is within the TIF district. It will also put pressure on some of those real estate parcels to go up in price. And so we realized that we couldn't probably have a set price for parcels, but we could at least negotiate a percentage whereby if the Industrial Development Board felt compelled to sort of step in because they weren't satisfied that the development was happening fast enough, then there would be an opportunity for the IDB to take some action.
And who would appraise or determine what that price is?
That's what I was going to add. We pick an appraiser, they pick an appraiser, and if they're too far apart, then we can pick a third appraiser, and then we get it's a traditional multi-MAI appraiser process of independent appraisals that would be used.
And that's all in the development agreement.
Yeah.
It's also very complicated.
Well, this whole funding agreement has been very complex and complicated.
Yes.
All right, council, any other comments or questions for our guest? No? All right, Chief, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I don't know how many of you would like to stick around for our planning and zoning committee meeting. It's always exciting.
I want to be there.
You'll be on the edge of your seat, but if not, you are free to exit at this point in time. And I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Ledford.
Nowhere I'd rather be.
Okay, if you don't stay for planning and zoning, it's a $15 fine. Okay.
Essentially an alternate versus Karen will talk about.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Well, Karen, we ran a few of them off. But I see we have some that stuck around, so I'm glad to that. I will now take us into Planning and Zoning Committee, and we'll take a motion on the minutes from our last meeting. Okay, minutes will stand without objection. Karen, we have a couple of cases and a couple of items to cover today. We have a couple on today's, or this evening's agenda. Are you wanting to start with case 0068?
Well, if we can, we've had a couple items that have been moving. On tonight's agenda, item C, which is the short-term vacation rental overlay district map. Today, we realized that maybe some of those items were a mismatch, a zoning ordinance amendment. At the same time, we have a new zoning ordinance underway. And Phil can speak to that, but I believe there's a new ordinance for that.
I was just handed a copy. Phil, you want to bring us up to date?
Sure, if I can have my copy back.
There you go. See how that's how it works.
The one change that we made here was simply to make a revision to the definition of short-term vacation rental district. because the ordinance currently states that the exhibit to that section can be amended from time to time, and we are just asking the council to amend to include an additional area within the short-term vacation district within District 1. And this is, I guess, meets up with the rest of the short-term vacation rental district of the city, but it's a minor amendment to that area. And it's allowed by your current ordinance to be able to be amended from time to time. So that's the only slight change, and we did have an alternate version prepared if that's subject to the council's approval, and I can read it this evening if you wish.
All right, Karen, I've anticipated a question from Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I must have left
Here it is.
my copy at my former seat. So, Phil, let me understand.
Yes, sir.
So this, what we've been handed today, do we need to offer a replacement at 6 o'clock?
Yes, sir. It is, it's got the, I believe it's got the same caption that you have right now here. It just does not try to restate the entire chapter 38, section 432 here. It simply is, well, I'm reading off of the ordinance provision here. It's the definition is 38-2, I believe, in the code. And it's merely talking about the short-term vacation rental section on there. And that map is the only thing that's changing. Currently, the ordinance allows you to change the maps from time to time.
That's correct.
And the question is, do you want to have it go back in front of the planning commission and wait for an additional time period? If not, just amend your map. And that's what we've got in that version.
So let me ask again, when we get to
Item C.
item C,
Yes.
do we need to make any kind of amendment to what is on our current agenda?
I prepared that amended version, and we can do that as an alternate if you wish for this evening, or we can do it to substitute, however you wish.
Okay, let's get an alternate version for tonight. That would probably be easier to make a motion for the alternate version.
Yes, sir.
And we would be good with that?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I am in support of this. I offered this up. From the chair position, I'm not in a position to make a motion, but I would certainly appreciate somebody on this council, and this only affects District 1, no other district. But I'd certainly appreciate someone making a motion and seconding this so that we could get this approved. But if we could have an alternate version for tonight, I think it would probably make life easier for us.
Very good, sir. I believe the Chairman of Planning and Zoning will be tracking that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Madam Vice Chair, I see your light.
Thank you. Would it be possible for us to get a map, to be able to see this definition on a map of what is currently in the overlay and what the expansion of the overlay would be?
Yes.
Okay.
And we will send you a copy. There is actually a attached map, at least in what we gave to Nicole, I think, on here. It doesn't blow up as big unless there's a version.
Okay, I have not happened upon that yet, so that would be
Okay.
really helpful.
We'll do it.
The other thing, just to make sure that we all know what's happening. So when we expand this portion of the short-term vacation rental overlay, it will allow anyone that lives in their home to be able to have the privilege to apply for a homestay, owner-occupied homestay, and then would open up anything that is eligible to be a hotel, zoning-wise, would be eligible to apply as well within.
They already have.
We already have that.
Okay. But so the main change that we have is that we are opening up homestay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Dr. Burrs, see your light?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. For 0052, is Mr. Parks here? Okay, the applicant for 0052, that is on, and I want something read into the record for that. he has it.
Okay.
And because sometimes in the past, we have had people build things that are different from as presented to council. He and I have talked, everything's cool, but I want guaranteed the quality of what's going to be built. And they've agreed to it. I want it read into the record by him and have him agree to that. And Phil, I guess rather than reading it into the record,
Yes.
can it be attached to the record and have him agree to it?
As long as we have a copy, yes, we can do that, and it can be included in the minutes tonight for that amendment.
So he doesn't have to sit and read it, but he does need to bring it and we can
Needs
attach
to bring it to us, and I can read it in the record if you wish, so that it's clear on the record.
However,
Yes.
well, he's not here. This is the Vance Road property. Is there somebody else here for that?
Councilwoman Burrs, we told the applicants that the meeting started at 6 because of the
Okay,
budget hearing.
no
So he's
problem.
probably not here, but I'm happy to follow up with him and ask him just to email us a copy, and I'll get copy Phil.
He and I have already had that discussion. He's fine with it. That's perfect.
Okay.
Then he'll have time to email it, and then you guys will have it.
Yes, I will do that right after this.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Karen, we've covered short-term vacation rental amendment. We've covered case 0052, note of record, and I have 0068 as a case in opposition.
Yes,
If we're on track with each other?
yes.
Okay.
This is on Bliss Avenue, and it's just the area, that little triangle between Amnicola and the Wilcox yards, the Wilcox rail yards. So this is a rezoning from M1 to R1 for one home. So residential uses are not allowed in the manufacturing zone. This area is zone manufacturing. We've had a couple cases in the area where people want to build homes or can just work on, update their existing homes. That does require a rezoning. The site's surrounded by a single unit attached, even though this is zoned M1, the site's surrounded by single unit detached residential uses and vacant lots. Warehousing and outdoor storage are to the north of the site, about 1 block north of the site. The site's in the historic River to Ridge area plan, which recommends an industrial hybrid. Secondary uses in that zone are residential. And note if it's adjacent uses are similar and building on the same block on both sides of the street. So there are residential uses on this block on both sides of the street, so staff felt that it was relatively compliant with that secondary use criteria of the plan. The plan also recommends providing a wide variety of housing options and preserving existing single-unit residential uses. So although the requested rezoning doesn't actually specifically meet some of the plan recommendations, it does meet several goals and kind of meets that second criteria. This is just a picture of the site, just to kind of let you know the surrounding area. So staff found the request is generally compatible with its land uses and development form along Bliss Avenue. There was opposition present at Planning Commission, some discussion about driveway location on, it's a very narrow, long lot, about driveway location and drainage. I think there is more of a concern about what is happening on other lots along this street. It seemed to be less focused on the use and the rezoning. So Planning Commission recommended approval, and so this is comes with that recommendation to approve to R1.
Very good. Councilwoman No, I see your light.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Karen, I have yet to speak with the developer for this property. I have spoke with those that are in opposition.
Okay.
But the developer has yet to have a conversation.
Would you like me to reach out and ask the
Yes,
developer to call you?
because right now, yeah, I'm going to defer this until I do have a conversation with.
Okay. The other case that had opposition at Planning Commission in May was on Orchard Knob Avenue. It's a rezoning from R2 to M3. A portion of the site has a large structure on it. It's was zoned M3 in 1976. The applicant's seeking to rezone the R2 portion, which would be the remainder of the site. Staff noted that Orchard Knob Avenue has a little bit more of an industrial feel, and as you head west along Ocoee and Olive, transitions to more of a residential use. The site in the Area 3 River to Ridge plan is designated as industrial hybrid, which really is a light manufacturing use. And just notes that type of use can be located near neighborhoods and not quite as an intense a neighbor as some other industrial uses. Just south of Ocoee is also the railroad line. Staff found that the request is compatible with adjacent industrial uses, and since the manufacturing property has been on the site since 1976, it seemed a reasonable extension of an existing zone. And because there is an R1 property and single-family house just west of the site, staff was recommending a robust 30-foot landscape buffer. There was opposition present from, I believe, the Neighborhood Association, sounded more just interested in the case and some concern about operation on site. Planning Commission did recommend approval, maintaining the 30-foot landscape buffer, but adding an hour of operation condition, and that limits hours of operation between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., just to ensure there's not activity all night to possibly impact the neighbors. And that comes with a recommendation to approve with the two conditions.
Councilwoman Knoll?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this, once again, was an issue, but we did meet with the Ken Smith, the president of the Neighborhood Association, and so the issues were resolved. So we're good to go on those.
Right. And then there's one more case on the agenda for a resolution on Ziegler and East Brainerd, but there was no opposition of Planning Commission for that.
Okay. Karen, I have a question on the PUD 0055.
Yes.
There were staff concerns, and several times we have worked through this. Is staff satisfied?
So you're right, staff had some initial concerns. There was a revised site plan. There was some discussion with Public Works Transportation, just making sure the access. I think we ended on just one matter. There was quite a bit of discussion at Planning Commission about the applicant would still need to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Right.
Just making sure that timing worked with the applicant. Did they want to defer, go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, Planning Commission, kind of talk through that with the applicant, and the applicant wants to move forward. So I think just noting that the applicant would still need to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, but otherwise, I believe most of the issues have been resolved with a revised site plan.
Very good. And to be fair to the applicant, I did ask several times, are you sure you want to go to Boza?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Are there any other cases today, council members, you'd like to discuss on the agenda? I see no other cases that had without opposition. If not, I was informed we do have an attorney-client this afternoon. We will meet in the Collins Conference Room. Mr. Chairman, you have one more item, I know, Karen, but we will have an attorney-client right after this. Recess until 6. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Karen, go ahead with your last item.
Yes, this is a little unusual. We've had a lot of discussion, staff, LDO, planning, city attorney's office has had quite a bit of discussion on the Brainerd overlay zone and the role of the Board of Zoning Appeals in hearing variances. And so we met briefly as part of the, during the city council work session, and determined that confirmation from council, some sort of action by council that is council's intent, that variances to the Brainerd overlay zone be heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals like all other standard variances, would meet the would confirm to staff and the city attorney that in fact that board should be hearing action on those variances. We have quite a few cases that are situations, developments that do need some action that have been held up. This just says there is a place for those to get relief from the standards, and that would be the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I think that Phil can add anything to it, but I think this is just a simple resolution prepared for next week, just stating that is council's understanding would allow those cases to start being processed through the Board of Zoning Appeals.
And will that give them enough time for the next Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for issues to be resolved here potentially by the board?
I do not know, but that is as quickly as we can act. And I did confirm with Dallas Rucker, who's been one of kind of coordinating, that we were hoping to act this today. But I don't have their deadlines in front of me.
Sure. We'll be glad to prepare the resolution here and just express that as the intent of the council. That'll be no problem.
We can do that tonight,
But I think it'll
Next week?
have to be next week, yeah, at this point.
okay?
Sorry.
Yeah, so we can do it, have it on the agenda for next week.
Okay, thank you.
Any other business to come for planning and zoning this afternoon? All right, then we will stand in recess until 6 PM.